I'm bigcal and welcome to my world. Today is a revision of my top 10 most wanted games list. So I try to do this pretty much every year around the same time. It's normally in May. I'm just a little bit late with it this year, but it is what it is. And basically I go through a list of 10 games that I want to try and pick up the most within the next 12 months. So basically I'm going to go through the list from last year, see what I've picked up since then, and then revise the list with new additions to it based on the fact that I'll have picked up some games and have to add to the list. So yeah, just a quick note, some of these games are sort of bundled together, so there are technically more than 10 games, but I'm bundling some of them as just one in the list. So we start off with WCW Super Brawl for the Super Nintendo and WCW Main Event for the Game Boy. Still want these for my wrestling game collection. Still difficult for me to get them because they never released here in Europe. So I have to import them, and that's import fees and delivery fees on top of that, and it's just expensive, and I never see them for the right price. So keep looking out for them. One day I will finally remove them from this list when I buy them. Right, so next on the list then, Excitebot's Trick Racing for the Nintendo Wii. The sequel to one of my favourite Wii games, Excite Trucks. So this one, again, did not release in the UK, which is why it's difficult for me to get hold of it, because I have to import it from America and all the costs and everything. Yeah, it's a pain in the arse. And I just really want to play it. Some people think it's better than Excite Trucks, some people think it's worse. I want to give it a try and find out for myself. So hopefully one day we'll finally get it. Yeah. Checking my list again, we have for the Super Nintendo, Power Rangers. There are a handful of different Power Rangers games, but it's just the one, just called Power Rangers, not the movie, not the racing, not the fighting one, just the Power Rangers. It's a 2D beat-em-up. I had it as a kid, so a lot of nostalgia for me, and yeah, I just never see it again for the right price. One day I will, and I'll finally pick it up and relive my childhood, but until then, it's going to stay on this top 10 list until I can finally buy it. We'll get there. Yeah. And then we have another bunch of games bundled together. We have Twisted Metal 1, Twisted Metal 3, and Twisted Metal 4. I only need these three now to complete my Twisted Metal game collection on the PlayStation's systems, as I have Twisted Metal 2, that was my first ever PlayStation game. I have Twisted Metal Black, and Twisted Metal Black Online on the PS2, Twisted Metal Head-On for the PSP, and the Twisted Metal Head-On extra release, whatever it was called. It was Twisted Edition on the PS2. Twisted Metal Small Brawl on the PS1, that was American only. Imported that years ago. And then, of course, I have Twisted Metal, the reboot that was on the PS3, that is absolutely phenomenal, by the way. Yeah, so I just need 1, 3, and 4. The biggest problem there is that 1 is quite pricey these days. 3 and 4, as well as being a little bit pricey, didn't release in Europe, so again I have to import. God, why did we not get so many games? I mean, 3 and 4 aren't particularly good, because Single Track, who developed Twisted Metal 2 at least, I don't know, did they do 1? Definitely did 2, which is widely considered one of the best games, certainly in my opinion, from the series. They stopped developing the games after the second one, and they kind of went downhill, then up, and then down, and up again. Yeah, so not the best games, but I do want them for my collection. So, yeah, at some point we'll have to just import them for whatever cost I can get them at. Anyway, moving on. Dragon Ball Origins 2 for the Nintendo DS. I already own the first one, and I want the sequel. These games go through the original Dragon Ball story, which is really nice because normally we just sort of get Z and then bonus bits of GT, and it gets kind of boring just going through the same old stuff, so it's nice to have the original Dragon Ball games there. The first one heavily relied on touchscreen movement and actions and things. The sequel still has some touchscreen stuff in, but tones it down a bit and improves the gameplay in various ways, and it is often considered to be far superior. And I'm a big fan of the first one, so the second one I want to get, but of course it keeps shooting up in price, so I just have to look out for a deal. So, whether I'll get one, who knows. Then we have a Dreamcast game, Dynamite Cop. which is essentially the Dynamite Cop was the sequel to the Die Hard arcade game, and it's kind of like a 3D beat 'em up brawler with guns. Yeah, it's just the Die Hard game without the license, and I've played a demo of it. It's absolutely fantastic, really fun. I think I mentioned before I did buy it at some point well over a year ago, but the seller got in touch with me and realised, finally after he'd sold the game that, it doesn't have the original inserts and things into the game. They were just printed off, so cancelled my order for that and never got it. One day I will definitely pick it up because it's one of the premier Dreamcast games that I don't own that I really want to. Then we have, for the Game Boy, The Real Ghostbusters. I know, not a big title, not really a well-known one, not a beloved title either, but it's one that, again, I had as a kid, and it's really weird because it's one of those games where, depending on the region that you're in, it was a different game. So, I think in Japan it was the Mickey Mouse, what was it? There was a series of Mickey Mouse games, and it turned into Woody the Woodpecker. Can't quite remember the name, I'll have it on the screen. It was based on that series of games in Japan. Then here in Europe, I think we got Garfield as the license for it. And then in America, it was Ghostbusters that had the license for it. So the same games, just different characters. How I ended up with the Ghostbusters version as a kid, the American one, I don't know, but I had it. And yeah, it's basically a puzzle game with a bit of platforming. I always liked it as a kid, and I just like to have it again for nostalgia reasons. Nostalgia regions? Where the hell is that? Not showing that on camera. Anyway, next then we have, for the Sega Master System, Phantasy Star, the original one. I just like to own it just because it's a cool piece in gaming history, as one of those really old RPG games. Similar, not quite similar to Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest, because it still had sort of the dungeon crawling aspect, the first person thing going through that a lot of RPGs had before Dragon Quest came out. So it has that, plus I think it has the typical turn-based action for your fighting and things. So yeah, it's kind of a weird mix of what has been and what would become when it comes to RPGs. So yeah, I would like to own the first one at some point, and then all the rest on the Mega Drive. But yeah, those ones are very expensive. But I think the original Phantasy Star might be within my budget, especially just cartridge only. I'm perfectly fine with that. I don't need the box and the manual. And lastly, then we have an original Xbox game, Chicago Enforcer, and I do believe this one was NTSC only as well, only released in America. So import fees, as usual. Yeah, it's basically just a mob-style game, first-person or third-person shooter in the style of, the Godfather game and lots of others that released around the time when there was sort of like a... when GTA came out, lots of people kind of did sort of similar, but not quite the same, where they'd have smaller levels and, it wouldn't be open world, but you'd have similar gameplay and stories and things like that, but it was all around, the mafia and mobs and things like that. Yeah, so really want to add that to my collection just because I'm really interested in the mafia and stuff like that. Just now realising I missed a game off the list, so we'll throw it in here, and that is for the PlayStation 1, Ape Escape. Been wanting this for absolutely years. Tried to get it at the retro gaming market a year ago. Didn't see a copy, only found the PSP version, so I picked that up instead. Yeah, so one day I would finally like to own it. So that was my list from last year. Did I get anything from that list this year? If you watch my videos regularly, you should know a couple at the very least, because I've shown them off in pickups videos. Yeah, so we'll start first then with the lowest one really, The Real Ghostbusters for the Game Boy. Finally bought it, I think it was for a DIY gaming box towards the end of the year. Yeah, didn't cost me quite as much as I probably should have paid for it. Got it a little bit cheaper, so that was great. Yeah, and I still enjoy it to this day. It is a fun, little decent puzzles platformery style game. Doesn't need the Ghostbusters license whatsoever, but it's there, and it's fun, and I had it as a kid, so I'm glad to have finally picked it up. Then, of course, we do have that original Xbox game, Chicago Enforcer. I imported it for pretty cheap. Very happy with it. Not the best game. It does struggle a bit with the controls, a bit iffy there. But yeah, it is a game I'd like to delve into at some point and play through just for the story. Set in Chicago, set during the Al Capone days. So yeah, it could be very fun to really go through and play. Right then, the game that I accidentally left off the list until I looked down and realised that was the next game. I was like, I don't think I mentioned that one, because I didn't. Yeah, PlayStation 1. Ape Escape. Finally bought it. Yep, got it for a decent price on eBay, I believe. Yeah, and it is Ape Escape. I can finally play it. You know, I always wanted it as a kid, so in magazines looking through, it's like, wow, that looks really, really cool, but you needed the new dual analog stick controller for the PlayStation, and I didn't get one for years. When I finally got one, I never got Ape Escape, and I still don't know why. But now I have it, and yeah, it looks really cool as a PS1 3D platformer. Plays really well. You know, once you get used to using the sticks to control certain things and that, and then the face buttons for other things. Once you get used to these slightly weird controls, yeah, it's a really fun game, and are now on the 3 main Ape Escape games on PS1 and PS2. I'm looking forward to playing through them all at some point in the near future. And lastly, for what I got on the list, a pretty decent pickup, I thought, especially for the price. I got it again less than what it should have been used. I got it brand new and sealed. Twisted Metal 3 for the PlayStation 1. Of course, it is the American version. I did manage to get it from an English seller. And again, brand new and sealed for less than what it would have cost me for a used copy importing from America. So I'm very happy with it. It's a terrible game, plays like crap, but I'm finally happy to have one of the Twisted Metal games knocked off the list after all these years. So I think the Twisted Metal games have been on there since pretty much the beginning. Yeah, so it's nice to finally knock it off that list. So we then have to move on to the new list. So just going to quickly go through with the piece of paper here what's staying on, and then what's getting added on after we've taken stuff off. So we still have WCW Super Brawl / Main Event for the Super Nintendo and Game Boy. We still have Excitebot Trick Racing for the Nintendo Wii, as well as Power Rangers again for the Super Nintendo. Twisted Metal staying on here, but it's now just Twisted Metal 1 and 4 for the PlayStation 1. One English, one American. So yeah. Dragon Ball Origins 2 for the Nintendo DS, sadly still there. Dynamite Cop for the Dreamcast remains on the list, as well as Phantasy Star for the Sega Master System. Now, despite the fact I picked up 4 games, we are only adding 3 to the list because remember Twisted Metal 3 was part of the bundle with 1 and 4. So, the newly added games to the list this year are the Dragon Quest 25th Anniversary Collection for the Nintendo Wii. They really screwed us over here in Europe with the Wii with some of these collections. We got Super Mario All-Stars Collection, which was just a disc with the ROMs of the Super Nintendo All-Stars Collection on. And a fancy little booklet, and I think there was a DVD of bonus extras, but yeah, we got that in here. We did not get the Kirby collection, which looks amazing by the way, nor did we get this Dragon Quest collection, which nobody else did outside of Japan. I think the Kirby one at least came out in America. We got fuck all. Yeah, so it's only in Japanese, and it is Dragon Quest 1, 2 and 3, and I believe it includes the original Famicom versions, and then the Super Nintendo remakes of 1, 2 and 3. A bunch of bonus stuff as well on the disc, and a nice booklet and things. So yeah, I'd really like to get that to add to my Dragon Quest collection at some point in time. And speaking of Kirby, Kirby Superstar Ultra for the DS. I love Kirby Superstar on the Super Nintendo. It's a fantastic collection of little mini games plus some full games in there. It's really awesome. And the DS version, lots of people claim, is far superior, has more content, and is just better in every way, pretty much. I did buy it at some point, a couple of years ago, maybe by now, and unfortunately, it just did not work. couldn't get it working on my original DS, my DS Lite, my new 2DS XL, or my new 3DS XL. Wouldn't work at all on any of the systems, had to send it back and get a refund, but I'd very much like to own that again at some point in time, but an actual working copy. That'd be lovely. And lastly, another Dragon Quest game to add to the collection. I would want to add Dragon Warrior Monsters 2 Tara's Adventure for the Game Boy. So I already own Dragon Quest Monsters 2 Kobe's Journey, but I don't own the second one yet, the Tara's Adventure, which seems to be much rarer, more expensive and considerably harder to get hold of. Again, it never released here in Europe, so I have to import from America, and it's expensive from there. We're looking at least £70 for a copy of it, which is a bit of a pain. Because for some reason they decided, Dragon Quest Monsters series decided, let's do like Pokemon and have two versions. Thankfully they only did it that one time, but a bit of a pain. Seems that everyone got the Kobe's Journey one and very few people bought Tara's Adventure. So I need that to finish off the collection, because I do believe that is the last Dragon Quest game released in the English language that I need. Yeah, I do believe that's the last one. So fingers crossed one day I will get it. Anyway, I'm bigcal. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think of my newly created top 10 most wanted games list for me to try and get over the next year. Let me know about the games that I got this year, if they're any good, if you like them. Let me know what games you're looking to pick up within the next year or so, and I'll see you again next time.